Uh, See, how you doing?
How are you?
Very good. Yeah. Wasn't gonna lace up the tie, the shirt with suit.
Hey,
And I think we all want to hear about your trip to Italy. Are you going to report on that?
maybe post council remarks over wine.
Okay, we'll get started. Welcome, everybody, to the July 8th, 2024 regular city council meeting. I'd like to ask our substitute city clerk to call the roll.
Counselor Long,
Present.
McLaughlin,
Present.
Counselor Runyon,
Present.
Counselor Randall,
Present.
Counselor Richardson,
Present.
Mayor Mays.
Present. Item 3, this Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4 is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I believe we noticed an executive session for this evening after speaking with the city manager. Doesn't seem necessary to have tonight. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Great. Any objections to not having an executive session?
Oh, I don't
I
know.
didn't think so. Okay. Thank you, Mr. DeCara. Can we go ahead and approve the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second that.
Been moved by Council Randall and seconded by Council Long to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 5 is audience participation. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which does not later appear on the agenda. Up to 3 minutes per person will be allowed. Citizens are encouraged to ask questions with the understanding that the city can either answer the question tonight or refer that question to the appropriate staff member who will get back to you within a reasonable amount of time. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the city council for up to 3 minutes on any item that is not on the agenda? Let the record show that no one has raised their hand or volunteered to come forward. So with that, we'll move on. Item 6, city manager's report. Mr. Cleaves.
Mr. Mayor, a few items this evening. One is that there is a community survey for input on tourism and our transient room tax dollars, which is up and posted on the city's website and Facebook page. And a press release went out to local media outlets last week. We'll be accepting responses and submissions to that survey on July 15th. And so if you can please help spread the word and get as much participation as we can, that would be very much appreciated. The Strategic Investment Program survey closed last Friday. And so we'll be gathering and going through the raw data that we've collected, and we'll be likely reporting out on that survey data at the upcoming Strategic Investment Program work session. The Local Government Academy for fall 2024 will be live on the city's website. The application portal will be live on the city's website next week, July 15th. Applications are due August 9th, and then the first session is August 27th. That's always been a very well-valued and strong program. Glad to see it back. And if you can, again, please help spread the word and encourage people to sign up and learn more about their own local government. I handed out some business cards to almost everybody a moment ago. These are security camera registration business cards. As the council may recall, we set up a security camera registration program where citizens can register their personal security cameras for their home with the police department. This does not give them access to any of the footage or access to those cameras, but lets police officers know where cameras are located after an incident, and then that information can be requested. And so this is part of the program to build awareness of the program itself. And so I handed out a few of those business cards for you to share. There's also additional business cards at the front of my office here on the second floor. Also had a couple of updates from the Dalles disposal with the heat that we have this week. They'll be shifting their schedule and starting operations about 5 a.m. If a constituent is missed, the Dalles disposal will provide additional pickup at no charge. But with the heat wave that we're having this week, they've shifted their operations and wanted to make sure you were aware of that. There are continued cooling shelter operations at the Gloria Center. That'll operate at least through this coming Wednesday. They'll be assessing that day by day as the weather changes and we get additional updates. They'll also be providing water, snacks, some hygiene items, and first aid items. And they have a very active and updated emergency shelter page and Facebook page for other updates. But again, with the heat wave we're experiencing this week, wanted to make sure you were aware of those operations as well. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Any questions for Mr. Klebs? With that, we'll move on. City council reports. We'll start on my left with Councilor Runyon.
Individual meetings with city attorney, city manager, and a citizen concerned about the Wi-Fi project. And I referred that to the city manager to discuss.
Councilor Richardson,
Nothing to report this evening.
Councilor Randall,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On June 26th, the Historic Landmarks Commission met, and we heard a presentation from Ann Moorhead regarding the Waldron Drugstore Light Projector project completion and a Tony's Building Site public survey results. And on the July 4th, I participated in the parade with yourself and Councilor McLaughlin. That's all I have.
thank you. Councilor Long,
Yes, so I attended the most recent community outreach team meeting, gave them a little update on our Wi-Fi project. And also, we are planning to go to Washington, DC the week of September 9th. So we'll have an update then, and I am planning to attend and represent the city. And I also met with the city manager last week.
Councilor McLaughlin,
Well, as Mayor Pro Tem, I was asked to attend the State Eagle Convention, and I did so and kicked it off. I attended an airport system development meeting Friday ago, and where we discussed developing plans to make a fairness for developing the water, sewage, internet connectivity. And we're going to abandon the term SDS, but go more for a fee usage based to share those expenses. I did attend a homeless meeting today at 1 o'clock. I'd like to report that the Airbnb issues that were in Scenic Drive, we have no incidents or anything to report. Everything's calm. I did on July 4th attend the parade with the mayor and Scott, as he said, and that was a fun adventure. So that's my report for this week.
as far as my report goes, on July 1st, I attended a wildfire open house at the Readiness Center that was put on by numerous state and local agencies. On the 2nd of July, I visited with the new development, I think it's called Town Farm or Farm Town, the Stelzer
Farm stand.
Okay, thank you. I encourage everybody, at least part of it's open. I encourage everybody to stop by and pay your respects to the two young people that are making that thing happen. It was very impressive to me to go in and see it firsthand. It's far from completed, but at least they have part of it open, and it's, like I say, it's very impressive. I'd like to thank Councilor President McLaughlin for standing in for me on the 19th. while I was in Japan. And that concludes my report. Item 8 is the consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the city council to spend its time and energy on the less routine items and issues. Any councilor may request an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of the action items section. Tonight, we just have one item on tonight's consent agenda, and that is approval of the June 24th city council meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I have a correction on the minutes from that meeting. Is this appropriate time to bring that up?
Yes.
It's page 6. McLaughlin asked what Hood Aerotech did at the airport. That question was asked by Counselor Runyon, not me. So if we want accuracy in our minutes. So that would be the only change.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with, as amended, with the minutes being amended?
Also move to accept the minutes and the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Been moved by Counselor McLaughlin and seconded by Counselor Randall to approve the consent agenda and the minutes from June 24th as amended. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 9A is an authorization for the purchase of aluminum chlorohydrate. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of council. Each year, city staff issues requests for proposals or RFPs for the supply of a variety of water treatment chemicals used at our water treatment plant and at our wells. The supply contracts are based upon the unit pricing that each supplier offers for the upcoming fiscal year. Normally, these contracts don't come before council, and so you never even see these, but one of our chemical contracts this year is expected to be over the $100,000 threshold, and therefore I'm here tonight, and that's the contract for aluminum chlorohydrate, or ACH. Without getting too technical, ACH is the primary chemical that we use at the water treatment plant to clean the water. It helps us remove the suspended dirt and debris from the water by clumping together the particles of the dirt large enough so our filters can remove them. In response to our RFP this year, we received 4 proposals for the supply of ACH for the upcoming fiscal year, or actually, I guess now the current fiscal year, the 24-25 fiscal year. The lowest bid our proposal that we received was from Brenntag Pacific in an amount of 49.7 cents per pound of wet weight. This is actually a decrease in price from our prior year, and that was followed about 2 years of very significant price increases on this particular chemical. And you may be wondering why with a price decrease, we're coming to the council this year and we haven't in past years. And that's because this coming year, we anticipate to treat a lot more water at the Wicks Water Treatment Plant through the winter as we start to bring our aquifer storage and recovery program online. So we'll be treating additional water, injecting it into the well, and we expect that program to begin sometime this coming winter. So that's the change, and that's why we are ending up with an estimated contract price of $120,000 for the upcoming year. The adopted fiscal year 2024-25 budget includes $290,000 in our water fund, which is allocated for the purchase of water treatment chemicals. The low price from Brenntag Pacific is estimated to result in a total annual contract cost of $120,000, and there are adequate funds available for this contract. With that, it's staff's recommendation that the council move to authorize the award of contract number 2024-007 for the purchase of aluminum chlorohydrate to Brenntag Pacific Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $120,000.
Any questions for Mr. Anderson?
Dave, how long have we been using ACH as a main coagulant? I mean, ballpark, like
Ballpark.
a year, 50 years,
No,
20 years.
we have been using ACH since about 2008 or 2009.
Council Runyon.
So
obviously you have enough money in your budget to do that, but does that, in your mind, put something else maybe down the line in trouble because of the amount this is taking?
Funds budgeted for this purchase. The only question was what the bids were going to come in at and whether we would actually realize the amount that we budgeted. So we've got it covered for this purpose.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Well, then the chemical coagulates the particles and they're clumped together and they're filtered out, happens to the aluminum chlorohydrate. Is
So that
bad?
becomes part of the particle
Oh, it does.
that gets filtered out.
All right. That answers that question.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, somebody like to make a motion?
I can go ahead and do that. I'll move to authorize the award of contract number 2024-007 for the amount of aluminum chlorohydrate, ACH, to Brentag Pacific Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $120,000.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Counselor McLaughlin and seconded by Counselor Richardson to award the contract for the purchase of aluminum chlorohydrate. Is there any more discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is authorizing the city manager to execute a participation form and other documentation related to the opioid settlement. Mr. Kara.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. Council might remember I appear to come back before you every year or so with a new opioid settlement connected with some multi-district litigation that was filed by 33 some odd attorney generals throughout the United States and joined in by cities and counties as participating jurisdictions against pharmaceutical distributors and manufacturers. Some others that might sound familiar and that I've come to you all for some authorization in the past include Rite Aid, Walmart, Teva. Tonight, it's for Kroger. And the argument here that appears to have won over the courts and Kroger, who agreed to this settlement, is that these pharmacies throughout the country played a role in the nation's opioid epidemic by effectively looking the other way or otherwise not investigating the overprescription of opioid-containing drugs by physicians. In this case, Kroger agreed to pay about $1.2 billion to these states and municipalities. They also agreed to some injunctions governing some opioid marketing, sale, and distribution, and some of their dispensing practices, and effectively releasing them from future claims on this issue. The deadline for the city to opt in by executing the participation form is August 12th. And just like previous settlements, council might remember, the total number of Oregon participation forms that are received by the settlement administrator determines how much money comes into the state of Oregon and therefore to all the other cities and counties that are participating. The League of Oregon Cities executive director recently emailed the city attorneys encouraging us to bring this action to our councils for authorization because the more cities that join in, the more money we all get. I've reviewed the participation form. I believe it's also in your packet. And I recommend the city council take all necessary steps to opt into it by authorizing the city manager to do just that. If the city doesn't opt in, it cannot directly share in those settlement funds, and it may reduce the amount of money for programs to remediate Oregon's opioid crisis. If you take a look at page 28 of 78, you'll see that all too familiar statistic of the Dalles city at the very bottom, 0.1723418,738%. It's very specific, and that number, whatever that number is the amount of money the city could expect to receive if it participates and nearly all other jurisdictions also participate. In the previous years, in the 3 other authorizations that I've requested and this council has granted, the city has been earmarked about $340,000 for opioid funding, and those funds must be spent in specific ways and there are reporting requirements on them. Nearly all of them exclusively are relating to abating the opioid epidemic. And so I don't have a number for you here tonight because, again, the deadline for participation is August 12th. And only after that time will the settlement administrator be able to inform the participating jurisdictions how much money they're expected to receive. But nonetheless, it's still my recommendation for council to move to authorize the city manager to execute the participation form and all other necessary documentation for the Kroger National Opioid Settlement.
Questions?
Yeah, I keep seeing everything talking about settlement, and that's well defined, but what is the basis of the settlement? What did they do wrong in the opium crisis?
So the basis for the settlement with Kroger and all the other pharmaceutical distributors, so the pharmacies like Rite Aid and
Right.
Walmart and Teva, the ones that I mentioned at the beginning, it's all the same. Effectively, the argument that the state attorney general has made is that these pharmacies didn't do enough to prevent the opioid crisis, and that they played a role by taking very lax measures with respect to ensuring that the prescriptions they were filling were valid. They would have, there's examples of somebody comes in on a Monday and fills in a prescription for 20 OxyContin pills produced by Purdue Pharma. And then they come in on Tuesday with a prescription from a different doctor for another 20 pills.
Oh,
And, instead of looking the other way, instead of, flagging that for the authorities, these pharmacies apparently decided that if they don't fill this prescription, one of their competitors will. And so they might as well take the money and fill the prescription. Hey, a doctor wrote this. So who are we to second guess a doctor? Which seems sensible. It's not a particularly creative argument. It's not a particularly strong legal argument either. But nonetheless, one after the other, these pharmaceutical companies have looked into their crystal ball of legal finances and determined that it's much cheaper to settle this case for 1.2 billion than to end up paying 10 times that when they lose.
thank you. Now I understand.
You bet.
Other questions?
No.
I have one. I'm a little confused maybe if the Kroger is expected to pay 1.2 billion and you say that the more cities and counties that participate, the more we'll get. It seemed to me it would be the opposite. The more that's more cities and counties that will be dividing up a finite number.
Then,
Is that-
sure. The 1.2 billion, excuse me, that I mentioned in the staff report is the theoretical maximum, assuming full participation of the Oregon jurisdictions. And so it will be less than that if fewer than the maximum number of Oregon jurisdictions participate. Yeah.
So the 1.2 billion, it just goes to Oregon.
No, that's total in this case. Previous settlements, I believe the very first one with Johnson & Johnson, that was by far the largest settlement. It was around $17 billion. This one's only 1.2 billion, much smaller, but still a ludicrous number. But the toll of the opioid epidemic in the United States has been a ludicrous toll, frankly. So,
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept this?
I'll make a motion. I'll move to authorize the city manager to execute the participation form and all other necessary documentation for the Kroger National Opioid Settlement.
I'll
Second,
second it.
it's been moved by Counselor Long and seconded by Counselor Randall to authorize the city manager to execute the participation form. Is there any more discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next is the consideration of a resolution that would update the city council rules. Mr. Kara.
thank you, Mayor Mays. Last month at our June 12th, no, I believe it was in May. Oh, in June of last year, June 12th, 2023, council directed staff to commence the process of revising its rules and code of conduct policy. by reviewing the current rules, which were last updated in January 2020 for legal sufficiency and updating them consistent with some best practices. So the city clerk and I collaborated to perform a rather comprehensive review of those rules. And last month, well, effectively last month, in May 2020, May 28, 2024, council had a chance to review our proposed draft and provide some key feedback on a number of points. Council might recall at the end of that discussion item, I mentioned please to give us a month and to review these rules and to please send us your questions or thoughts or comments or any other concerns that you might have via email, and we'll bring them back here at a July meeting for council's action in the adoption of this resolution. No other direction was given, and so no other changes to the rules were made other than on the 4 key points that were discussed at the last meeting. As a reminder, they're listed in the agenda staff report. Firstly, on page 9 of the rules, which is page 9 of the rules, it's Rule 3G12C, now reflects council's direction to add a new requirement. Any proposed ordinance that's amended by council orally, right, at a meeting, be renoticed to the public and not adopted at that same meeting when it was substantively amended, which is already a consistent requirement that we follow in Oregon land use ordinances, but effectively applying that standard to the rest of the city's ordinance adoption and legislative policymaking. On page 5 of the rules, it's Rule 3C1, council directed adjusting the minimum time required for noticing regular meeting agendas, which currently stands at 10 days, down to 7, with the understanding that staff will strive to meet or exceed that time when feasible, to ensure both the public and council have sufficient notice and an opportunity to prepare for council's meetings. Number 3 is reflected on page 7 of the rules, and it's Rule 3G6. Council directed removing the proposed changes which were recommended by the League of Oregon Cities, connected with public comment, including setting a maximum time limit on that entire portion of the agenda and prohibitions against the mayor and councilors from engaging in back and forth dialogue with commenters. With some finality now, I believe I've captured council's intent in the A through F that's listed there on our staff report, which are the six rules, which are effectively the same as the ones that we have today, except for the last 3. So just to go over them now, the presiding officer must open the floor to public comment on any topic not appearing on that meeting's agenda. And each commenter at that meeting is entitled to the same amount of time to comment, which is up to 3 minutes per commenter. And if a response from the city is requested, the presiding officer refers the matter to the city manager. So those are the rules that we currently have. They seem to be working well for our council and our community. The proposal that was presented to you at the May 28th meeting included these other D, E, and F requirements, which relate to effectively signing up for comment. And so first, we have the in-person comment rule, which is that commenters must sign an attendance sheet, which is provided at the entrance to our chambers before the meeting is called to order. The second relates to virtual or electronic comments, where they must contact anybody who's intending to comment virtually must contact the city clerk's office by noon on that meeting day to get some interactive access privileges. And finally, for the submission of written comment, where commenters must either email council or provide 9 printed copies for the dais, giving that to the city clerk before the meeting is called to order if the commenter would like it to be present on the dais for council to consider. And I kept a note in there indicating that any person may still email any counselor at any time. And finally, on page 18 of the rules, we have Rule 8A and 8B, which are connected with council appointee evaluations. At the May 28th meeting, council directed the rules not to directly include the process for evaluating the performance of council appointees, aka the city manager, city attorney, municipal judge, in the rules, but to instead include basically its authority to adopt those standards, criteria, and policy directives used for those evaluations, which would include the formation of a subcommittee for the purpose of recommending an appropriate evaluation process to the council. And that change is reflected there. I just wanted to put a reminder in here in my staff report that at that meeting, it seems council did form such a subcommittee, including Councillor McLaughlin and Councillor Long, to provide recommendations to council within 6 months on an evaluation process there. From my staff report,
Oh, of the rules.
18. Yeah, it's rule 8A and 8B. And so that's the staff report. The motion language is on page 41 of your packet. It's moving to adopt resolution number 24-016 as presented. I imagine there are some questions. I'm more than happy to answer them.
Questions for Mr. Kara? Councilor Runyon.
With the city manager's permission, I had a discussion at a late date this morning, actually, with the city manager. I'm basically thinking, unless somebody gives me another idea, that we not approve this tonight, but delay it to another meeting. There are a couple of verbiage things inside of this document, and I'll give you what they are that we need to look at. One had to do with I'm trying to find a page here real quick, had to do with the mayor pro tem. It says that he may vote, and it's actually, he's still a sitting council person and is acting as mayor, but does not have the same rules of not voting unless there's a tie. But it says may vote, and it really shouldn't say that. So we need to investigate changing that. The council rules were not part of a vote by the people. That's the charter. But in the council rules, I think we could correct it there without a problem, but it needs to be looked at by our city attorney. And the other one, so that one was on page 2 of the council rules, page 47 of 78. The other one I wanted to mention
If I may,
was on page 3.
if I may,
Yeah.
Councilor Runyon, just on page 47, specifically, we're looking at 2A5.
2A5, correct?
Powers and duties. And the last sentence there says, provided, however, the council president may still vote on questions before council in such cases. And I think the point Councilor Runyon is trying to make is that the council president shall or still votes on measures or questions that come before council. They
Yeah.
need to vote aye or nay or abstain. And so we could strike the word may from that sentence to capture.
We could do it tonight as an amendment. That'd be fine with me. But one way or the other. The other one is on page 3 of the council rules, and that would be section C1 vacancies, A occurrence, and halfway down that paragraph, if a counselor is absent from the city for 30 days without council's consent. So let's say Tim's going to go off to Ireland again, and he's going to be gone for 30 days, and he calls the city manager up and says, hey, I'm going to be gone. That's kind of what we've done, or told the mayor, et cetera. But according to this sentence, we're supposed to bring it to the council and apparently vote on it. So can you take your vacation or not take your vacation? I don't know, but it seems like it needs to be reworded. And since that's not a charter item necessarily, because rules are not voted on by the public, I'm thinking we need to look at that and see if there's a relationship that we have to adhere to there, or can we just fix it?
So at the point of like, I think I could maybe help, or I have to weigh in on this. I actually missed the attorney's email with the deadline to get back about these things somehow. So I would appreciate it if we could not vote on this tonight so I could have some more time to look at it as well. And then I'm usually pretty good about my emails, but maybe in the future, if it's not just to you, but to anyone, if we're sending out something and it's like a negative thing, like respond, if you have at some point, but you don't hear back from everybody, yes or no, maybe it's a good idea just to be like, hey, did you have any comments? Because in this case, I missed it and nobody knew
Yeah.
that I hadn't. It wasn't that I didn't have a comment, I just hadn't had a chance to look at it yet.
I missed it as well.
Things.
I missed it as well until today or yesterday, going through it all again, and all of a sudden they just popped out. So like things do. So I think we need to look at it and
If you
correct
don't
it if
mind.
we can. easily. If we can't, then we'll have to go through other means.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
So of course, one of the council alternatives, I believe it's alternative number 3, is, decline action and provide staff additional direction, right? So that's, obviously if a council majority wants to do that, that's no problem. Can I just respond, Councilor Runyon, just to the 2 concerns that you flagged? Because I think that they're worth responding to. The first is with respect to the council president. Yeah, we could totally, change that language a little bit. Would you rather have it say, just for the sake of argument, provided, however, the council president shall still vote on questions before council, as opposed to may still vote?
Okay, are you on the one on page 2?
Yeah.
Yeah. This morning in the discussion I had with the city manager, the council president still votes would have been an effective, leave out the word may and put an S on the word vote. The council president still votes on questions before council in such case.
Sure.
That would be a fix, possible fix.
Absolutely. With respect to the vacancy issue that you just flagged, though, on page 3, you also mentioned that it's not a charter issue. In fact, it is a charter issue. It's in Charter Section 18.2B, and this language is copy pasted directly from the charter. So I can't do much there to wiggle. There's not much wiggle room. Council consent is required based on the charter.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so with respect to a councillor taking a vacation, can you take that trip to Ireland, Councillor McLaughlin? Absolutely.
Please.
Are there
leave me out of this.
consequences for doing it? Absolutely. And that's what the people of the city of the Dalles wanted when they adopted that charter. Now, that doesn't mean anything arduous. It says without council's consent. Well, council gives its consent handily at every single regular meeting on the consent agenda. That could be one way to do it. Another way to do it would be, for example, at the end of a meeting, the mayor frequently asks, or the presiding officer frequently asks, is there any other business to come before the city council? Councilor McLaughlin, that would be a great time to give us a heads up that in a few months, you're going to be taking a trip to Ireland, and that if the council would please provide its consent. And if not, well, you can still go to Ireland, but the council can also declare your position vacant if it wants to.
Well, you can have my job.
No, thank you.
However, I did give plenty of notice.
Sure. And so, yeah.
You weren't gone for,
I was gone 3 weeks.
And so that section of the charter, section 18, has 2 portions of it. The first portion is the first sentence of that section A. A councillor vacates their office upon that councillor's death, adjudicated incompetence, recall from office, or resignation. That's really just vacancy by operation of law. So nothing else. The council doesn't need to do anything there. If one of those 4 things happen, the position is deemed vacant. And I think that supports the public interest. The next portion of section 18 of the charter is the rest of that paragraph. That portion is effectively vacancy by council declaration. And so that also supports the public interest. If a councillor fails to qualify as an elector of the city within 10 days after they're elected, well, the council has the option, it doesn't have to, but if a majority of the councillors want to, they could certainly declare that position vacant. The same is true if a councillor is absent for 30 days without the council's consent, or if a councillor misses all the council's meetings within 2 months, or if the councillor moves out of the city, or if they're stopping to be a qualified elector under Oregon law, or if they're convicted of a criminal offense, punishable by a loss of liberty. And so I don't have any wiggle room here. The charter is the charter. It would require a popular vote to change those. I just wanted to flag that specifically for the council.
okay, any other questions?
Just the option I had given was that we could either delay this and look into it or debate it here, but, whatever's easier, but
In consideration of Counselor Long's request, I think we ought to delay.
in the future, if you're going to take some time off and you might be close to that month, you might want to make sure you let every counselor know before you leave, not just the mayor and the city manager.
Since we are going to delay this, I think it would be prudent for the city council to give the staff direction on what we would like to see changed, and I think we've just hit on one, right? The may vote, still votes, that one.
So just to be very clear about this, City Attorney Kara, the occurrence, rather the vacancies and occurrence portion, as outlined in the rules, is currently enshrined in the charter.
100%.
All right. So that's not really something we can take action on.
Correct.
I
But
mean, we can strike it out of our rules, but it's still in effect.
everything that's in section 2 of the rules, which is only 3 pages, it's page 2, 3, and 4 of the rules, cannot be changed
All right.
without amending the charter.
Other questions or comments? I have a few, and full disclosure, I did talk to the city attorney about this in advance of the meeting, but I thought that some of this should come up, in discussions with everyone else. My first question is it necessary to include provisions that are already in the charter? Let me just preface your answer by saying that when I first became mayor 5 years ago, I thought it would be prudent for the city council to pass new rules, and one of my objectives was to cut down the number of pages on the then existing rules from 30 pages down to something, I thought we cut it in half. And I believe Council Runyon was part of that effort.
Yeah.
I think Councilor Long too, but I'm not. Yeah.
Wasn't, but Runyon was.
Anyway.
I worked on both the rules and the charter, but the charter was only directed to work on a specific area, not the whole thing. And if those words were in the charter on the thing I brought up, I didn't bother to see it there because it wasn't part of my mission. It was about the length of time of election for the mayor and the at-large councilor at the time, and the zones that we had.
I bring that up because, again, pursuant to my efforts to reduce the number of pages in the rules, longer, necessary to include provisions that are already in the charter.
So that's a great question. Just to dovetail off of what Councilor Runyon just said, he wasn't even aware of that requirement in the charter, and that sort of emphasizes the point. No, it is not required to include these charter requirements in the rules, is the very short answer, but the very incomplete answer to your question. It is certainly advisable. We have counselors that don't know what the charter says, and that's not a reflection of any counselor, but that's a reflection of reality. We have counselors that are volunteers, and you yourself, the mayor, as a volunteer. We have members of the public. Any access to our charter, which is the constitution of our city, I support. I think the public supports that. The public interest certainly does. And the language of the charter it could be better. And absent, a whole rewrite, which, could be done very easily, I think, to at least get the process started. And by very easily, I just said that to make Matthew a little annoyed because nothing is easy. It might take us 2 years to get there, but at least we get the ball rolling. We can affect change much more rapidly as a city government through the adoption of these rules, and including the charter's requirements here is certainly helpful for me as the city attorney. And I'd like this to be helpful as a practical guidebook for council, and not just for these 6 people sitting up here, which includes the mayor, but also for your successors in office, who we can deliver to them a packet that has everything that they might need with respect to their role, their responsibilities, their obligations, their authorities, and what the public's expecting of them. But by the way, these charter requirements are only 3 pages. And the whole rules are 23 pages, and that's including some very generous spacing. And so there doesn't seem to be many or any downsides to including it here. I recommend the inclusion here, but I am open to everybody's thoughts. And if 3 of the 5 counselors don't want them here, they will not be here. These are council's rules.
I'm not suggesting that I prefer they not be in there. I was just asking the question. So does anybody have any opinion about it, one way or the other? Councilor Long?
I understand wanting to make it short, but I actually agree with the city attorney that it's nice to have it in one place, a document we're likely to read and refer back to quickly.
Councilor Richardson?
I agree with that. I think that having them here is not onerous, and I think it's probably wise or useful to have the charter reiterated in our rules, given that they're only 20 some pages long. And I'm also, just for myself, fine with holding off until next city council meeting to vote on these, given that we have at least a couple of us that want to review it further. And finally, I do have a I guess a question or maybe a comment directed at you, Mr. Mayor, I think. On page 2, or that is page 40 of our packet, under the public comment rules here, 3D, the in-person comment, saying, proposes that we have members of the public who want to speak at a city council meeting in person to sign an attendance sheet prior to the meeting. And I just want to sort of point that out. Is that something you feel comfortable enforcing, given that we do have people from time to time that show up and want to comment kind of at the last minute and without identifying themselves? Are we going to make them actually participate in identifying that they are a neighbor and a member of this city before commenting?
As a matter of fact, I raised that issue with Mr. Kara earlier too, and I do have a problem with it, because we never, I don't know why we instituted this we only did this, I think, in the past year. I'm not sure why. And, if somebody shows up 2 minutes late and they didn't sign the form in time, because I get that form like 1 minute after the meeting starts. Are we going to deny them the opportunity to address the city council because they're a couple minutes late? So, yeah, I do have a problem with that particular, what page is that on again? I know
Page 40 of our packet,
page 40.
page 2 of the report.
I brought that up this morning as well.
I don't actually care if people have to sign in or not. I guess I'm don't think that's necessary or critical personally. I do think it's wise for us to insist that people who want to comment in public on city business at our meeting identify themselves. I know some people might be a little uncomfortable with that, but that's sort of in my opinion, that's sort of the burden of speaking to the public business, is you identify yourself as a member of the body that would be affected.
Yeah, and then following that, paragraph E requires people to contact the city clerk's office by noon the meeting day. There again, people that might want to Zoom in and comment aren't going to know that they're supposed to call the city clerk before noon that day. So that might be something we want to.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think in particular, the sign up for the virtual option was in direct response to some of the Zoom bombing incidents that have occurred,
Yes.
which occurred last week to the Wasco County Commission meeting.
Which occurred last week, what?
Sorry, excuse me. Which occurred last week during the Wasco County Board of County Commissioners meeting.
Oh, yeah.
So the virtual option in particular, those provisions were put in place to guard against that.
Which they should be. And there should be a formality even when coming here so that we identify who the person is and are they a resident. Now, that may not be as important, but I think in giving input into decisions, I would like to know that information up front. So,
Yeah, ditto.
And
Yeah.
in regards to the virtual option, on the city's website where you access our agenda packets, it is noted prominently on the top of the page, the sign up requirements for the virtual option being noon on Monday. And that way we can provide the link to that individual who wants to submit comment, and it's that checkpoint.
but number 5 on the agenda really answers that to the audience, because it gives an open, they have the right to speak, but they need to identify themselves in the participation comment section.
So, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to mention, a large amount of the actual administration of this particular agenda item is handled by the city clerk, who isn't here tonight. And I know that she has a much better grasp of some of the administration of this than I do. But I will say that some of the issues that have arisen with respect to public comment is we have to include the names of the participants of the meeting and their views on a subject in the minutes. That's one of the requirements of the public meetings law. And sometimes the city doesn't really follow up on somebody's name for the record, right? And so we misspellings happen frequently. That's mostly with respect to those that are appearing in person. If they're appearing virtually, frequently they'll have their name listed in the Zoom link or on the Zoom for display. With all that said, there's a balance here, I think, between some of the ideas that we're talking about and some of the efficiencies of our staff. and some of the decorum of our meetings. I think it might be an adjustment, and I'm not just talking about public comment, but so many of these rules, there could be a small adjustment period, and I think that's okay. I think the intent here is not to stifle public comment, but to just organize the city's meetings. It's a little bit easier on nights like this when the crowd isn't that thick. But sometimes when this room is standing room only, it might be helpful to have these rules in place with the understanding that it's not possible to add new rules on the fly, but it's always possible for a council majority to waive those rules in any given situation. Just wanted to remind the council of that waiver provision, which is applicable to nearly all of these rules for a given situation. Also, since this is now a discussion item, it seems, if the direction here is to add in an exception provision for the presiding officer, while also maintaining these sign-up rules and requirements to help staff's burden, I think that that would be a pretty acceptable compromise for everybody in the city.
That they bring it.
How would you word that? I mean,
Something like provided, however, keeping it the way it is now and saying provided, however, the presiding officer has discretion to allow people that miss those deadlines. Well, we should keep, frankly, the IT specialists have said we should keep the IT virtual option the way it is. But with respect to people that show up in person, and if they're 2 minutes late, that's not really in the spirit of these rules, to deny them access to their electeds. And so, provided, however, an exception can be made by the presiding officer for those that appear late at, after 5:30, something like that.
in the way you just worded that, it would be completely my decision.
Unless council had anything else to qualify it by, but it appears Councilor Long has had her hand up.
All right, go ahead.
No, it's okay. So two things. Hopefully I don't lose my train of thought here. One is that I thought the reason that we had to hammer this down with some things I didn't like is because we were trying to protect ourselves legally. And if you have the right to waive it and then you don't waive it for someone and for someone else, that is a problem. The second thing that was actually the first thing I was raising my hand for was that we're sort of discussing this as if people can come and talk about something with more urgency. So like something that's on the agenda, but city council doesn't allow that. It specifically says not on the agenda. And so people should know ahead of time, unless they're just feeding off someone else coming up and making a comment, that they're going to want to make a comment. And because we're not allowing back and forth, it's not like if someone follows the rules and can't come and speak to us, they still are going to have an opportunity to talk to us offline or go further, because no decision is going to be made without their input, which is what I think we're trying to avoid. I personally don't like the rule of they can't talk about anything that's not later on the agenda, but that's me, and that's why I run urban renewal different. So I just wanted to throw that out there that, yeah, they might not be able to speak, but if it's not on the agenda, they still have an opportunity to speak to us about it. We're not cutting that off.
That's right. And these proposed rules with respect to public comment are only applicable during that specific, very brief portion of our agenda. Mr. Mayor, very frequently, I've noticed, if you might see somebody in the crowd from a different partner agency. Sometimes it's the county assessor or the fire chief, and you're just like, well, I see our county assessors in the audience tonight. Why don't you come on up and give us your thoughts? Or you have a question. Why don't you come on up and we're talking about an item? And that's not what this rule is on. This rule is strictly on coming to public comment just to talk to council about, hey, I have this issue up on 14th Street or whatever. And it's something that's not on the agenda, has nothing to do with what the city's talking about that night, but it's just the interaction between the public and its council.
Councilor Long, you said something that kind of confused me. I thought you said that we're not allowing people to have interaction or give and take. I thought we eliminated that.
It's right here. Let's see.
But we took that out.
Might have just been how I read it. Maybe because we were saying we're going with what the League of Oregon Cities said. So I saw it a second ago and I thought it said.
Didn't we take that out?
I certainly hope so. Yeah.
Okay.
I believe so.
Okay, wait. It's a double negative. Oh, okay. That's what happens when you're skimming. I missed the double negative, so maybe, yeah,
Right.
removing the prohibition.
Okay, so we're really back to the question of whether or not we're going to require people to sign up to talk. Right?
In person.
In person, right?
Yeah.
No,
And I don't necessarily have a problem with them signing up to talk, but I'm not going to eliminate somebody who, as you said, came in 2 minutes late, you know? And I mentioned to our city manager this morning, we need to have a really big sign right there at the door, not laying on that little dais out there, but, you know, please sign up if you intend to speak tonight. And a whole bunch of that is that, you know, many citizens are not very comfortable about coming in to talk to large groups, and especially this austere group here as well. And so it's very hard for them to come forward in many cases, and we've witnessed that, and we try to be patient and allow people to, not, you know, interrupt and let them get done. And that's just one of the things that we can do as still a small community, and we have some flexibility, I believe. And people need to be allowed an opportunity to talk. And if they didn't quite step on the right step at the right time, and I don't think we should be turning people away. So anyway, I'm sorry I opened up a kettle of worms here tonight. I've been on the road a lot, and I just hadn't been around to read all that, and then I missed it. So doing that this morning, but I still in favor of delaying action on this item to make sure that we're looking at all the items that were brought up additionally here tonight, and to give Jonathan and our city manager an opportunity to review, and if they need to talk with the League of Oregon Cities or whatever else they might have to do. So
don't put yourself down. I'm the one that brought it up too. So
Do we need a motion to delay, or can we just kind of go by consent?
is there anyone here who objects to delaying this?
No
Okay,
objection.
so there we go.
Mr. Mayor, if I may. Just in terms of timeline and schedule, the next council meeting is quite full, and then we don't meet in August.
I'd say there's no hurry on my part.
Make sure everybody's aware that it probably won't come back until September at the earliest.
This whole review is not an issue of timing, so let's just fit it in as you can.
Okay, so that the staff has direction on this particular issue, it seems to me we either leave it in as is, we take it out and put something in here about the mayor's discretion, or we leave it in as is.
There are a couple of other items on there in that list, though.
Yeah, I have a couple other items too, so to
Yeah.
raise, but
Anyway,
what's your pleasure? Leave it in, take it out.
Sorry, what are you talking about?
Talk about the
People-
issue of people having to sign up
For in-person comment.
for in-person comment.
How about we strike before the meeting, or preferably so we have their name written down correctly. That's the point, right? And to control the flow. So
Must
that
sign the
work?
attendance sheet provided.
It's a good idea.
or preferably before the meeting, I don't know, something, but just so it's clear. You're not,
But you had suggested putting a period after what? I thought. Or did you pick up on?
I believe Council Long indicated that we should strike the provision requiring that sign up to be conducted before the presiding officer calls the meeting to order. And have it available at least before they submit comment, right? They must provide their name. They must sign the attendance sheet provided at the entrance to council chambers before they provide comment or something like that.
Like
and
the
then a
idea
big
of-
sign like Rod said, so that nobody accidentally.
it's like the idea of suggesting that people sign up to speak, but we,
Here,
yeah,
but we're not
right.
gonna,
It-
then,
Maybe we have a clipboard or something at one of these podiums so that, you know, we can see them signing it in front of us. And that way we can collect it after the meeting and staff has their names for the minutes.
I would also ask the city manager to check with the city clerk and make sure that she's on board.
I certainly will do that, Mr. Mayor, on this public comment piece, both in person and virtual. I know that the city clerk did substantial outreach to her clerk network around the state, around best practices when it comes to public comment. And that's where a lot of these different provisions came from. But when she gets back from the Galapagos, I will ask her again.
You know, I think a lot of these cities have done this because of the dramatic increase in public disruptions. And that's just something I don't see as a big deal here yet. So anyway, okay, anything else on that particular issue? Okay, on page 49, section A1.
You'll have to forgive me, Mayor Mays. I took an excerpt out of our agenda packet. I don't have the agenda packet page numbers. I have my own version. So
Page 4 of the council rule.
thank you so much.
I talked to Mr. Kerr about this issue this afternoon, and he informed me that section I or 1 or whatever that is, A1 under city manager is in the charter. Is that correct?
Section 21(9) of the charter is exactly what is listed on page 4 of this.
Right. Okay. I just want to point out that the very last sentence says that no person can be city manager pro tem for more than 6 months. As someone who's had years of experience in this, I can tell you that there have been many times that other cities that I know of have gone 6 months without a permanent city manager. And if it's in the charter, it's in the charter, but
I think what I'm hearing, Mr. Mays, is just another thing to look at for a charter review at some point in the future.
okay, that's fine. Okay, we covered that one. Okay, again, and this is something that I talked to Mr. Kerr about, and he informed me that it's already in the rules. I'd like to raise this issue on page 14 of the council rules, page 59 of 78. There's only one section on that page, so it's section E. And it says, councilors shall not ask people to appear before the council at a meeting to notice a complaint or raise a question. You know, if I'm at the supermarket and somebody comes to me with a problem and I think their best course of action is to come before the council and raise the issue, I don't really see a problem with that. Mr. Kerr informed me it's already in the rules, and I'm sure it is. How does the rest of the council feel about that?
I would be in favor of striking that, actually. It may be proper generally for people to go to the city manager first. But having a rule that says essentially discourage people from coming talking to the council, that doesn't necessarily make sense to me.
Well, that happened today as well. You know, a citizen wanted to meet with me. I listened to what they had to say, and then I said, you know, you need to call over to City Hall and have a meeting with the city manager, because our job is policy, not day-to-day administration.
Right.
And he's the one to talk to, and then he'll decide, you know, if there's a course of action, or maybe this is the end of the whole conversation you're having. But it's up to him to hear that information. So that's what I did, and I don't know if he called you or not.
He
But,
sent an email.
Anyway,
He talked.
I just think that's the path that we were supposed to be on. It doesn't hurt to listen. That's what we're there for. But as far as taking action and inviting them to the meeting to come in with a complaint, I said, you know, sometimes there's better ways to handle that to get the process started. And then certainly they always have the opportunity to come on their own and speak under the public time for 3 minutes. They can always do that.
Certainly.
But I look towards a solution to whatever their problem is, not causing more delay. Why not to go through channels?
And if they do come here, we are generally directing them to the city manager.
Yeah, and it's not going to be decided that night anyhow. So why not get on the right train?
So what's the point?
I have a comment about the point.
I was thinking of instances where, you know, we have people that come and they know it's on the agenda. And somebody stops me and says, and it's on the agenda, and I say, well, come to the meeting tonight. You know, that's.
Yeah.
So, I love having people come and talk, which is a little unusual, I think. And not, so the way that I took this was as a first step, we're encouraging counselors to do this because that's how we prevent misinformation when someone comes and speaks at the dais and we haven't had a chance to put it together a response. And so I think maybe we shouldn't be asking them as a first step to do that, but we can comment that that's available, right? We always want to encourage that. But what we want to ask them to do when they come to us is to reach out to the city manager so that we have a chance to get the response and then provide that information publicly. That's how I took it, not like a don't come speak to us, because I do encourage people to come and talk to us if they have a problem. But I can see that if I was new and reading the rules, that this would help me put a frame of mind that what I want to do is refer them to the city manager. And if you don't get satisfaction or if we don't bring it up on an agenda item, then come and do a public comment, because we don't always have the answers right at the meeting. And then things happen like on Facebook after urban renewal where someone said we found an extra $600,000 or something, and that wasn't true.
Well, if we could somehow include verbiage in our rules, which cleared up all Facebook rumors, I'd be all in favor of that. And we might be picking at nits here, but I wonder if just changing the word shall to should would relieve some of the.
My opinion is, why not just eliminate that first sentence? And then if you look at it, counselor shall refer such matters to the city manager or designee. And then if there's dissatisfaction with that and the people come back, then that could be where they come and appear before city council, so that there's still a chance. But in practical, that's the way it's been done. As long as I've been here, is when someone talks to me, I refer them to city manager. That's the first step.
Yeah.
Always.
I don't think it should be shall, because you could also weaponize that. Like when I first got on council, I often felt shut out of the process. And so I don't want anybody to feel that they can't just come to council and say something, or that I could be punished through council rules, because that did happen, or attempt was made to do that. Because if it said shall and I instead said, well, you could come and talk to us, then,
Let's make the sentence a little more positive.
Well, yeah, and I have a trouble with shall as well. So just wordsmithing this, I think we can avoid a lot of
I
things.
just want to say, Mr. Mays, this particular provision is copy pasted from our existing rules. I
know.
I'm sorry, from our charter.
No, from our existing rules.
Yeah, I said that.
I know. I'm just, I wanted to reiterate it.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
If I may make just an on-the-fly revision suggestion, you could strike the beginning portion of that paragraph and simply start with, when contacted by citizens about a complaint or question, counselors shall encourage such citizens to contact the city manager.
Yes,
I like that. Is that okay with everybody?
yes,
Good job.
that fixes it.
Okay. Page 61,
Which page is that in the rules?
16.
Okay.
61.
Citizen removal.
These two paragraphs, C1 or paragraph C and C1 underneath it,
51.
61.
on page 16 of the council rules, they appear currently, these are copy pasted word for word from the current city council rules, section 16.2 and 16.2 sub 1.
Okay, I only got two quick things on this. In the paragraph, the first paragraph of C, reasons for removal include missing 2 consecutive meetings. Should we add without an excuse?
No, I wouldn't recommend that you do that.
So if somebody misses 2 consecutive meetings, they can be removed from a,
Yeah, I mean, these subcommittees meet once a month. So you miss 2 meetings, you've missed a significant amount of your meetings for a year.
well, some commissions meet twice a month.
61.
Meet twice a month, that's true. But I mean, these are just the reasons for why a mayor can recommend to the council for removal. They don't automatically trigger a removal. And there are other provisions in here for that person on the committee to make their case. And if they have a compelling reason for why they missed 2 meetings, then that's certainly something council will look at. And I trust council to make that call, but I like to be able to give the authority to the mayor to have some flexibility. I don't recommend making it 3.
No, I wouldn't. I'll leave it up to you guys. I don't.
I
have a
think this
strong
is
feeling.
fine.
Huh?
It appears to be fine the way it's, in my opinion.
Okay, paragraph 1 below. Second sentence, the citizen may submit a letter of response. Shouldn't we put a time restraint on that? Because you have, the mayor has to submit a letter within 10, or submit a letter of resignation within 10 days. I would just hate to, I think that we should put some kind of due date that they have to submit the letter of response.
Mr. Mayor, I believe it says that the mayor requests the citizen to submit a letter of resignation within 10 days from the mayor's notification to the citizen. And so the 10,
Request the citizen to submit a letter of resignation within 10 days containing the reasons.
within 10 days.
Okay, the citizen may submit a letter of response,
Yeah,
which I took as separate.
no. So the way that this works is the mayor will ask a citizen to submit your letter of resignation in the next 10 days. And they have 10 days to do that.
Okay? And if they don't, the citizen may submit a letter of response as to why he shouldn't be kicked off the committee. I don't,
Within 10 days. Oh, I can very clearly add in the words within 10 days, within those 10 days to make that extremely
I
clear.
think you're talking about
Sure.
2 separate things here. So yeah, I think it should be,
Well, it's either a letter of resignation to you or a letter of response to the council.
So say that, submit their letter of resignation or
Yeah.
letter of
Response
response.
to the council, yeah.
I just think there should be their letter of response should have a date on it so that they don't.
I agree.
spend 6
And
months.
and I would say that the next section, number 2, indicates that you're moving on as the mayor with or without their letter. They don't have a time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think you're covered there under the current rules, but I will make that abundantly clear that it is 10 days from the day that you ask them to submit their letter of resignation to respond.
Okay.
Yes. Or submit the letter, as the case may be.
Okay, that's all I have. Anybody else?
I'm happy.
That's important to me.
Right.
Was that 10 business days?
Days. We count holidays and everything.
This might be coming up sooner, I think, just so you know. Okay, anything else? Does the staff feel it has sufficient direction to move ahead?
Plenty of direction. And tell you what, the next July, well, the July 22nd regular meeting is jam-packed. And council does not meet in August. So first meeting in September is what I'll target.
Yes.
That's pending some coordination with the city clerk and the city manager. But I'll target that. And if not, it'll be the second meeting in September.
I got a quick question. Is the fact that we don't meet in August, is that in the rules or the charter or neither? Or
It's in the rules.
is it, okay. Okay, anything else on this?
So that I'll take the opportunity to go through it and might have some more feedback.
Okay,
And I really appreciate it. These are your rules. I'm just the scribe. And so please, I welcome the feedback.
okay, item 10C. An ordinance repealing and revising certain provisions to the code. Mr. Carroll.
From time to time, staff or I will flag certain provisions of our municipal code that require some legal sufficiency repeal or amendment. When an adequate number of those kinds of provisions are flagged throughout the course of a year, I typically compile those recommendations into a housekeeping ordinance for council's consideration. We informally call it our code cleanup ordinance of the year. I've attached copies of the Dalles Municipal Code, Chapter 108 and 136 and 1124 to the staff report, and I'll just very briefly talk about what those are and what staff's recommendation here is. TDMC Chapter 1.08 was adopted in 1992, and it's called City Council. It prescribes then interim rules, which back in 1992, they were designed to be interim rules that govern council's meetings pending the adoption of some more formal rules as required by the charter. And so they no longer belong in our code because they were designed to be interim and they're completely overwhelmed by the force of the resolution through the charter for the council's current rules. You can disregard the portion of the staff report that talks about how I expected council to have just adopted new rules. But even though council didn't adopt new rules just now, I consider that too. However, if council declined to so adopt those rules, previous iteration of the council's rules since 1992 have already satisfied the chapter's intent to be temporary in nature. And so I recommend council repeal the Dalles Municipal Code Chapter 1.08 City Council in its entirety. Next is Dalles Municipal Code Chapter 1.36 Public Library, specifically Section 1.36.020, which talks about the third intergovernmental agreement between the Library Service District and the city. As council might recall, the city manager and the finance director negotiated the fourth intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Library Service District earlier this year, which in and of itself is sufficient, I think, for amending this section. But aside from the outdated references to very specific agreements, this section also appears to exceed the scope of the city's legislative authority. Effectively, if you read it, what it says is that we are basically ordering the Wasco County Library Service District to appoint a library board. In case it's not clear, the city does not have that legal authority. We also don't have the authority to compel by ordinance what the contents of a negotiated intergovernmental agreement contains. And so I'm very, very happy to recommend council to repeal that section, TDMC 1.36.020 in its entirety. And finally, the Dalles Municipal Code Chapter 11.24 is connected with enterprise zones. Council adopted this specific chapter in 1986, and I don't believe anyone's looked at it since. It is filled with outdated provisions of the Oregon Revised Statutes. It has completely unnecessary language, basically repeating what's in those statutes that have been since renumbered. I gave an example here, notably TDMC 11.24010C requires the city, as drafted, to process certain permit applications for qualifying enterprise zone firms ahead of other applications, but it doesn't carve out any exception when such prioritization might result in the city's violation of land use law, which has very strict timelines the city must follow for land use approvals. And so my recommendation is actually not to repeal the entire chapter, but to effectively do as I drafted it in the general ordinance itself, which is repeal a few of those provisions and amend certain others. And I'm happy to answer any questions about any of those. And then, Mr. Mayor, I did want to mention, I did include this in my staff report, but I wanted to mention it here tonight that Oregon law, ORS 294.1601, requires the city to provide an opportunity for interested persons to comment on the enactment of any ordinance which prescribes a new fee or an increase in the rate or other manner in which the amount of a fee is determined or calculated. Although this isn't a public hearing, certain revisions that are proposed for the Dalles Municipal Code 11.24 involve the city's fee schedule. And so I wanted to flag that it would be appropriate to ask the public if there's any interested persons who wish to comment on this issue.
You recommend we do that now or after the council discussion?
Anytime before the motion.
Okay, let's go with the city council first. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Kara on this ordinance?
No.
Mr.
1.36020 Library Board, did we develop, it really doesn't impact or get a response from their board, but have we had open communications with what we're doing here to that agreement? Are they aware of this?
I have no idea.
It really doesn't affect them.
Yeah,
but it's our relationship with them
sure.
and saying they're on their own and we have uh, not the oversight. Is that what I'm reading into this?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't contacted them. I don't think it would be appropriate if I did.
No.
And I mean, if they get our agendas, then they would see it, but it doesn't impact them. But Matthew may have.
I did not explicitly contact the library district, as this was really a cleanup, in particular, as we have a fourth IGA now and not a third. And the appointment of the library board is a function of the district itself. So it's not in any sense that we're cutting them loose or anything like that. There's this provision in our municipal code that isn't relevant anymore, and the fourth IGA would control.
I see the intent, but keeping, because there was some contention with some of the or the communication between city and library, I would just like to keep that lines of communication open so they know what we're doing that doesn't affect them directly, but yet they know that we're doing things in order to keep the housekeeping, so it does keep it clean in our relationship. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, and I can certainly reach out to that district
just-
and let them know.
Well, as long
Open
as,
lines of communication is always good.
as long as we all know there's nothing in this ordinance that's going to affect that fourth agreement.
That's true.
It actually clarifies things and I think further strengthens the relationship.
There you go. Then that's good.
That's what we want.
That's what we want.
Okay, anybody, any other comments, questions? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to weigh in on this ordinance, proposed ordinance, I should say? Anybody? Let the record show that no one has come forward to comment. Now, is this the time that, and since I'm trusting the council has no other questions or comments, that we ask if any counselor wants to have the ordinance read in its entirety? So,
No.
Not me.
Maybe a motion.
is there a motion to not
Yes.
have the ordinance read in its entirety? Or by title only?
I will make a motion to adopt general ordinance number 24-1406 as presented and by title only.
And I will go ahead and second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Counselor Long and seconded by Counselor McLaughlin to adopt this ordinance by title only.
General, General Ordinance Number 24-1406, an ordinance repealing and revising certain provisions of the Dalles Municipal Code, Chapter 1.08, City Council, Chapter 1.36, Public Library, and Chapter 11.24, Enterprise Zone for legal sufficiency.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mayor Mays.
Is there any other business to come before the city council? If not, we're adjourned. Thank you.